get the analysis. John Lough joins us, Senior Research Fellow at the new Eurasian Strategies Centre. John, thanks for being with us. For you, any surprises in what either Lavrov or Rubio had to say?
I would say absolutely no surprises. It was pretty clear that they were going to be talking today about restarting the diplomatic relationship between the US and Russia, which has obviously crashed since the start of the big war in Ukraine. They are trying to lay a path to a summit meeting between President Trump and President Putin. And they are going to see whether they can find some sort of agreement to end the war in Ukraine. I just find it interesting that both sides talk about the conflict rather than the war. Now, it remains to be seen whether they can do anything short term to address some of the issues that the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, referred to, the fact that the Americans believe that concessions need to be made on both sides. I think the Russians are taking a different approach here. They believe that they can actually win this negotiation because they feel they have some very strong cards, and that President Trump is really focused on just trying to demonstrate, perhaps through a ceasefire, that he has brought hostilities to an end.
And it's fair to say, I think, that the Russians are being consistent in what they're saying. Lavrov saying no NATO troops, no EU troops, no NATO membership for Ukraine. From the Americans, less so. There are inconsistencies in what's been said. I'm thinking back to what Defence Secretary Hegseth had to say, and then what Vance had to say, and now, of course, what's been said today.
Yeah, it does feel as though within the American camp there are different positions. We've heard even President Trump saying that he could use some economic coercion to persuade the Russians at least to come to the table and negotiate in good faith. And we're seeing Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor, saying that territory has to be discussed, and the implication is that the sides will have to find a compromise. But this is a very, I think, sort of Western way of approaching a negotiation of this kind. The Russians feel, I think, they've got wind in their sails. They can see that President Trump is in a hurry. I was in Munich at the weekend at the Munich Security Conference, and the Special Envoy for Ukraine, General Kellogg, made, I thought, a telling remark. He said that we're working on Trump time, and that means that we've got to try to resolve this very fast. Now, if you're sitting in on the Russian side of the table, you would think, well, actually, that gives us some advantage here because Trump wants to get this done quickly.
Kyiv saying that basically what is happening right now is that Trump is basically whetting the appetite of Vladimir Putin. Do you see some truth in that?
Well, I think you've got a feel for the Ukrainians here. The last thing that they wanted was for negotiations to begin without their participation. The Americans made it very clear that this is a US-Russian track for the moment. To what extent General Kellogg, responsible for the Ukrainian side of the negotiations, will play an important role, I think that remains to be seen. I'm rather doubtful that he is actually going to be a prominent figure. So you could perhaps see that the sort of foundations of the deal will be established by the US and Russia without either Ukraine or the Europeans involved. And it seems the Americans have this idea that there's got to be some sort of peacekeeping force, and the Europeans need to be responsible for that. And there's obviously a big gap here between the Russians and the Americans on this particular point. But we are a long, long way from a peace deal. My view is that it may be possible to achieve a ceasefire, and Trump might very well sell that as an end to the war. But the ceasefire option, I think, is quite a sinister one for Ukraine, because the Russians would almost certainly use it to put pressure on Kiev to hold elections. Parliamentary and presidential elections are overdue, and they've not taken place because martial law is in place in Ukraine. And if the Americans were to say to the Ukrainians, you need to lift martial law now, hold elections, internally in Ukraine, that could create a lot of problems. Both politically, one wonders whether the army would hold together. This would be a very different environment, and I suspect the Russians see an opportunity there to pursue their military goals by diplomatic means.
John, many observers you may be among them. You can tell me in your own words, obviously. Maybe you're looking at this and thinking that Vladimir Putin is actually wringing his hands, rubbing his hands together, expecting to get everything that he wants out of this. And I'm wondering what you think about the role, potentially, of Steve Witkoff, who's obviously Trump's a trusted man, I suppose, is the best way to put it. Someone who Trump sees as someone in his own image who maybe can hammer out a deal in some way, shape or form. Do you think Witkoff will be a positive influence as far as Ukraine's concerned?
Well, I think that remains to be seen. We don't know very much about his view of Russia or Ukraine, for that matter. My impression is that President Trump is actually indifferent to Ukraine's suffering. I'm not sure that he has much time for President Zelensky either, because Zelensky was not, as Trump saw it, very helpful when Trump was trying to find out more about Hunter Biden's activities in Ukraine and wanted
that was the first time Trump was impeached, wasn't it? The first time Trump was impeached, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there might be some bad blood there. But I think Zelensky's tried to play his cards well. He's delivered his messages. He's done everything possible. But this is now, over the heads of the Ukrainians. Witkoff was obviously important in delivering that Middle Eastern deal. He's a real estate lawyer, and he's got a tough reputation in that area. As far as I understand, he's known President Trump for a long time, is therefore a trusted ally. Maybe the unorthodox approach can bear fruit, but you can see what they're up against in the form of two highly experienced diplomats at the moment on the Russian side: Sergei Lavrov, the long-standing foreign minister; Yuri Ushakov, the former ambassador to Washington. Now, the negotiating teams have to be still confirmed, but I would have thought that on the Russian side we're going to see the heavyweights involved.
John Lough, Senior Research Fellow at the new Eurasian Strategies Centre. Thank you for joining us and sharing your analysis with us of the situation. Of course, we'll watch for all developments and hopefully we'll speak again for more clarification further down the line. John Lough from the new Eurasian Strategies Centre. Thank you very much indeed, sir.